Hello everyone, and welcome back to Altrole's Class Breakdown Series. I'm Bill, admin and instructor for Altrole, and today we're going to continue our series to give a general overview of all the classes in D&D 5th edition to help you learn about which ones you may want to try in your next D&D game. Today, we're going to examine the Druid, nature-based mages who seek to preserve balance in the elements and world. Druids revere nature above all else, which imbues them with magical powers either from the environment around them or some nature deity that they may worship. As such, their spells tend to be very natural or animalistic in nature, drawing strength from the very beasts and plants they hold dear. Druids believe that nature is a delicate balance and act to preserve the balance of the four elements: water, earth, fire, and air, so that one element never gets too powerful. As a result, they tend to oppose the elemental evils that seek to have their element dominate the other three, as well as evils that threaten all of the elements in totality. When it comes to their purpose and role, the Druid is a full spellcaster that focuses on healing, support, and utility spells, very similar to the Cleric class. What makes the Druid unique is their ability to wild shape into the form of animals, taking on that creature's stats and actions at the expense of their spellcasting. We'll talk more about wild shape later, but essentially it allows the Druid to act as the beasts they become, clawing and biting enemies with melee attacks, but unable to cast spells while in that form. So overall, the Druid's main focus is as a support caster to the party, but has some options in melee to defend themselves if monsters happen to get past the front line. To help summarize the Druid and clarify its role, let's go through a quick pros and cons list that I've organized into 3 main points for each. Starting with the pros, the first is that the Druid has great healing options. Through spellcasting, the Druid has a wide variety of healing options readily available at level 1, from regular healing like Cure Wounds and Healing Word, to the unique Druid spell Goodberry. Later level spells like Healing Spirit and Reincarnate also maintain the Druid as a powerful healer into higher level play. The second main benefit the Druid class has is that it has good control options. Alongside healing spells, the Druid has a plethora of spells available that allow them to control situations on and off the battlefield. By choosing spells wisely, the Druid can hold enemies where they want them with status effects and debuffs, setting up the rest of the party to unleash massive damage. The third main benefit of the Druid class is their high mobility. With the unique ability Wild Shape, the Druid can turn into other beasts and capitalize on their mobility options to great effect, like, for example, turning into a riding horse to gain 60 feet of movement while another party member rides on your back shooting arrows. Furthermore, higher levels allow the Druid to gain an increased swim speed and flying speed based on the creatures they turn into, giving them an immense amount of freedom to go wherever they want to. So overall, we can see that the Druid is a very good healing and control caster, with great mobility options through Wild Shape. However, there are some negatives to the class we need to address, the first of which is that the Druid has relatively low damage output. While the Druid does have spells that do good damage alongside the control options mentioned earlier, spellcasting is entirely unavailable while the Druid is in Wild Shape. Wild Shape also forces the Druid to use the animal's attack and damage modifiers, so at higher levels, the Druid is still going to be doing relatively low damage while in beast form. The second main negative of the Druid class is that they are relatively fragile. With only 1d8 as their hit die, they're not the weakest class out there, but they can still be killed fairly quickly if singled out. On top of that, Druids tend to shun metal armor, restricting them to light and medium armors and lowering their overall armor class. Plus, the nature of Wild Shape forces the Druid to go into melee range, putting them at risk for massive damage against tougher enemies. With these 3 factors together, the Druid can regularly be in tense situations where a backline support caster is at the front of the party taking more damage than would be preferable. Lastly, the final main negative of the Druid class is that they are complex to play. This is arguably the most subjective negative of all the ones listed, but of all the caster classes available, the Druid's wide array of options adds to their complexity in ways that can cause a new Druid player to get overwhelmed. Between managing wild shape, summoning creatures in battle, staying on top of healing, tracking spell resources, and choosing from the 150 different spell options across all the different spell levels, the apparent flexibility of the Druid comes at the cost of its simplicity. For a veteran player, this is no issue, but for new players, be warned that Druids have a lot going on, and it may take some time to truly master the class. With the overview laid out and the pros and cons analyzed, let's now review the unique class abilities that the Druid earns as they level up. At level 1, the Druid gains the Druidic and spellcasting abilities. Druidic allows the Druid to speak a special language only other Druids know, and which can't be deciphered by others without the use of magic. Spellcasting, on the other hand, can be a little complex when it comes to Druids, but let's break it down a bit here. The Druid is a Wisdom caster, which means their spell attack modifier and spell save DC are both affected by their Wisdom score. The Druid starts with 2 cantrips known, and 2 first-level spell slots. They gain higher-level spell slots every odd level, gaining second-level slots at level 3, third-level slots at level 5, fourth-level slots at level 7, fifth-level slots at level 9, sixth-level slots at level 11, 7th-level slots at level 13, 8th-level slots at level 15, and 9th-level slots at level 17. Spent slots for the Druid are regained upon finishing a long rest. Finally, when it comes to Druidic spell casting, before casting a spell, the Druid has to prepare them. They can prepare a number of spells equal to their Wisdom modifier plus their Druid level, and the spells must be a level which the Druid has spell slots for. Prepared spells can be changed after finishing a long rest through prayer and meditation. At level 2, the Druid gains the Wild Shape ability and chooses their Druidic circle. With Wild Shape, as an action, the Druid can magically assume the shape of a beast they've seen before twice per short or long rest. The Druid's level also determines what beasts they may transform into, starting at creatures with a challenge rating of 1/4 or lower with no swimming or flying at level 2, a CR of 1/2 or lower with no flying at level 4, and a CR of 1 or lower with no restrictions at levels 8 and above. There are additional rules for Wild Shape, but the main ones to know are that the Druid cannot spellcast while in Wild Shape. If reduced to 0 hit points in Wild Shape, the Druid reverts to their normal form, and equipment either merges to fit the new form or drops on the ground when the Druid uses this ability based on what your DM rules. As for Druidic circles, these are essentially subclasses, and these grant the Druid new abilities to specialize within the party. The Druid gains a new Druid circle feature at level 6, 10, and 14. We'll go over these in detail in their own section later. At level 4, the Druid gains their first ability score improvement. Ability score improvements add +2 to 1 ability score, or +1 to 2 ability scores, up to the soft cap of 20. Druids gain 5 ability score increases as they level up, and if your DM is using the optional feats rule, you can forego an ability score improvement to take a feat instead. Jumping all the way up to level 18, the Druid begins to age more slowly and gains the ability to cast Druid spells while in Wild Shape. And finally, at level 20, the Druid gains the ability to use their Wild Shape an unlimited number of times, ignore the verbal and somatic components of spells, and material components with no cost are not consumed upon casting. With the base abilities established, we can see that the Druid is actually rather lackluster in terms of options, relying on higher level spellcasting to stay relevant as they level up. Next, let's look at the Druidic circles the Druid can take at level 2, joining with other druids of like minds to specialize and defend a specific aspect of nature. There are 7 circles available to choose from at level 2. I'm going to go through them in alphabetical order, but if you want to skip ahead to a subclass you want to know more about, you can use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead to the one that you're interested in. Druids of the Circle of Dreams hail from the Feywild and seek to fill the world with wonder and joy. When taking this subclass, the Druid gains the Balm of the Summer Court ability, which gives them a pool of Fey energy that they can use to regenerate a target's hit points within 120 feet, as well as granting 1 temporary hit point per die spent. Further levels in this subclass let the Druid invoke the Fey to create a sphere of invisibility while resting, bonus action teleport themselves up to 60 feet away or an ally up to 30 feet away, and eventually can cast one of 3 Feywild spells after short resting: Dream, Scrying, or Teleportation Circle. The Circle of Dreams subclass focuses heavily on healing and support, utilizing the power of the Feywild to keep the party on their feet and protected from the evils that threaten them. This subclass is a great option for players seeking to have their Druid be a primary healer of the party, but may not have enough variety to keep you interested for very long. Druids of the Circle of Spores view the decay of life as a beautiful opportunity to transform it into new life. When taking this subclass, the Druid gains 3 different features: Circle Spells, Halo of Spores, and Symbiotic Entity. Circle Spells are special spells granted to Druids of this subclass at specific levels, starting with Chill Touch at level 2 and going up to Cloud Kill and Contagion at level 9. These spells are always prepared and don't count against the Druid's normal prepared spell limit. Halo of Spores surrounds the Druid with a permanent invisible aura of spores that allows them to deal necrotic damage that gets more powerful at higher levels to enemies within 10 feet who fail a Constitution saving throw. Symbiotic Entity lets the Druid use one of their wild shape uses to awaken spores to gain some temporary hit points, deal double damage with Halo of Spores, and adds necrotic damage to melee weapon attacks, all for 10 minutes until the temporary hit points are drained or until wild shape is used again. Further levels allow the Druid to infest a corpse and animate it, seed an area with deadly spores that deal necrotic damage, and eventually grants the Druid immunity to critical hits and the blind, deaf, frightened, or poisoned conditions. Though we haven't gone through all of them yet, I can safely tell you that the Circle of Spores is one of, if not the, most powerful and fun Druid subclasses available. With this subclass adding in varied damage options that work well for both an offensive or defensive Druid, it's hard for other blander subclasses to compete. If you're trying out a Druid for the first time, I 100% recommend trying out the Circle of Spores subclass. Circle of Stars Druids draw on the power of stars and constellations to protect and harness the powers of the cosmos. When taking this subclass, the Druid gains the Star Map and Starry Form features. Star Map gives the Druid a tiny object that acts as a spellcasting focus, grants the Guidance cantrip, prepares the Guiding Bolt spell, and allows for the casting of Guiding Bolt without using a spell slot. Starry Form allows the Druid to wild shape into a starry form, shedding light and choosing one of 3 constellations to grant a number of different buffs to either ranged attacks, healing, or concentration saving throws. Further levels in this subclass grant the ability to foresee omens and grant buffs to allied dice rolls or debuffs to enemy dice rolls, an improvement to the Druid's constellations from Starry Form, and eventually gains resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. The Circle of Stars is a good all-around subclass that grants some more specialization and flexibility to the Druid while not being too overpowered. The trade-off is that this subclass focuses heavily on the Druid as a spellcaster, and not on wild shape, as the starry forms it grants are best used on Druids that focus on ranged spell attacks and healing spells. Overall, Circle of Stars is a good subclass that turns the Druid more into a traditional backline caster. Circle of the Land Druids safeguard ancient knowledge by passing it verbally from one generation to the next, which influences their magic based on what type of land they're on when being initiated. Taking this subclass grants the Druid a bonus Druid cantrip, the ability to recover expended spell slots, and additional Druidic circle spells based on the land where the character became a Druid. Further levels in this subclass grant the Druid free movement through non-magical difficult terrain and hazardous plants, advantage on saves against magically created or manipulated plants, immunity to being charmed or frightened by elementals or fae, immunity to poison and disease, and eventually can cause beasts or plants to make a wisdom saving throw before attacking the Druid, and having to either choose a different target or have the attack miss if they fail the saving throw. The Circle of the Land is a useful subclass choice for the variety it can give across multiple playthroughs, as well as the ability to regenerate some spell slots during short rests. While the different land choices can offer different flavor and variety to the Druid, ultimately there's nothing about this subclass that is too over or underpowered in any one regard, and so overall it's just pretty okay. Druids of the Circle of the Moon are defenders of the wilds, often alone in their safeguarding of the forests, jungles, deserts, and mountains that remain untamed across D&D worlds. When taking this subclass, the Druid gains the abilities to Wild Shape as a bonus action, expend a spell slot to regain health, and Wild Shape into beasts with a challenge rating as high as 1. Further levels in this subclass increase the Wild Shape challenge rating limit based on the Druid's level, grant magical attacks to attacks made in beast form, grant the ability to use 2 Wild Shapes to transform into an elemental, and eventually grant the ability to cast the Alter Self spell at will. Circle of the Moon Druids embrace the beast within them, relying on increases to their Wild Shape power to influence their prowess in combat. While they don't emphasize spellcasting as much, the benefits they get to the Wild Shape ability more than make up for it. So, if you want to channel your inner Animorph and be an effective beast on the battlefield, the Circle of the Moon subclass is a must-pick. Circle of the Shepherd Druids commune with the spirits of beasts and the Fae to defend animals and creatures that cannot defend themselves, warding off monsters, hunters, and encroaching civilization that threatens their habitats. When taking this subclass, animals will understand the Druid when they speak. On top of that, the Druid gains the ability to understand and speak Sylvan, and they also gain the ability to summon an incorporeal spirit with one of 3 aura options: a bear that grants temporary hit points and strength buffs, a hawk that grants advantage on perception checks and attack rolls against enemies, or a unicorn that gives advantage to detect creatures and a buff to healing spells. Further levels give the Druid a buff to summoned creatures' hit points and attacks, an ability to heal summoned creatures with a totem aura, and eventually can automatically summon 4 beasts to defend the Druid if they get incapacitated. Circle of the Shepherd is another subclass that's good, but definitely specializes the Druid to be played in a specific way. In this case, it's meant to be played with a focus on summoning animals and spirits in battle to fight for them, granting buffs in and out of combat for this purpose. The aura choices grant some good variety to adapt to situations as they come up, so overall the subclass is a good option if you want to be a packmaster, sending your loyal animal friends to fight the forces of evil with you. Druids of the Circle of Wildfire recognize that destruction brings new life, and as such use their powers as a balance between the creative and destructive forces of nature. When taking this subclass, the Druid bonds to a Wildfire spirit that grants access to subclass spells, as well as the ability to expend a Wild Shape use to summon the Wildfire spirit as a friendly ally on the battlefield. Further levels in this subclass grant the ability to add extra dice to spells that deal fire damage or healing, the ability to cast spells from the Wildfire spirit when summoned, the ability to extinguish the spectral flames of slain creatures to heal or damage other creatures in that same space, and eventually gain the option to sacrifice the spirit if the druid drops to 0 hit points, immediately regaining the druid half their total hit points. The Circle of Wildfire Druid is a mixed bag of potentially useful abilities, but is a little underwhelming upon a deeper look. The spells the subclass grants are great, and all either fire or healing based, but the Wildfire Spirit summon can become underwhelming past early levels and doesn't hold up to the other summoning subclasses. It can definitely be fun, and I'd encourage curious druid players to try it out, but I personally would probably save this to be my second or third druid character rather than my first. It just doesn't jump out to me as something I really want to try. With all the class and subclass abilities explained, let's now look at how to build a druid character if you want to try one for yourself. With druids being a dedicated caster class, building them can seem complex, but is actually rather simple. For the purposes of this example, let's just build a basic level 1 druid that can cast spells effectively. For ability scores, the druid's highest ability score should be Wisdom, to maximize our spell attack modifier and spell save DC. The second highest ability score should then be Constitution, to beef up the druid's hit point maximum as much as possible. The rest of the ability scores can be spread out as you see fit based on what you have available. But I'd also want to increase my dexterity to at least a +2 modifier if possible, in order to effectively use finesse weapons and get as much benefit from light and medium armors as I can. Next up, let's look at the druid's starting health. To determine my maximum hit points at level 1, I'd take 8 and then add my Constitution modifier to it. Starting equipment is up next, and honestly, the options it gives you are great to start with. For my basic level 1 character, I'm going to go with a wooden shield to beef up my armor class with an extra +2, a scimitar, a good finesse weapon that I can empower with spellcasting and use in a pinch or until I get more powerful spells, and leather armor, an explorer's pack, and a druidic focus. The leather armor starts us at 11 armor class plus our dexterity modifier, which isn't great, but we're also not going to be tanking a lot, hopefully. The explorer's pack has a lot of useful adventuring equipment like rations, a water skin, and torches, and the druidic focus lets me cast spells without material components so long as I hold the symbol in one hand. With equipment squared away, let's dive into the level 1 abilities I'll have to note down on my character sheet. Druidic is very easy, as I can just list that as one of my known languages in the Other Proficiencies and Languages box on my character sheet, though I may also want to note that it's a DC 15 perception check for non-druids to spot a druidic message. For spellcasting, I'd want to make sure I have down my modifiers first, then begin selecting spells to prepare at level 1. My spell attack modifier will be my Wisdom modifier plus my proficiency bonus, and my spell save DC will be 8 plus my proficiency bonus plus my Wisdom modifier. Now, assuming I have a Wisdom modifier of +3, my level 1 druid will have a +5 spell attack modifier and a spell save DC of 13. With that sorted away, now we can add spells to our sheet. At first level, the druid knows 2 cantrips, so I can choose 2 druid cantrips from the druid spell list and add those to my character sheet. The amount of leveled spells I can prepare is simply my Wisdom modifier plus my druid level. So let's assume that I have a +3 Wisdom modifier. At level 1, with a +3 Wisdom modifier, I'd be able to prepare 4 druid spells, and since I only have first level spell slots, they would all have to be first level spells that I prepare. Now, all I have to do is go to my druid spell list and choose 4 first level spells and then add them to my character sheet. With all the ability scores, equipment, and level 1 abilities laid out, we have a level 1 druid ready to go. And that is everything you need to know about the Druid class in D&D. A solid support caster that becomes more specialized based on their subclass choices, all while defending the forces of nature against evil. My only complaint is that the base class features are extremely lacking, which the subclasses overcompensate for by granting 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 different subclass features all at level 2. Overall, this class is going to be complicated for people new to spellcasting, but once you master it, it'll be a ton of fun with plenty of variety within the party. But what do you all think of the Druid? Are you excited to try out some new wild shape options, or do you think they're just a glorified tree hugger with lackluster spells? Let me know in the comments below, or join us over on the Altrole Discord, which is linked in the description, to discuss it with the community. While you're there, feel free to say hi and check out our live courses that we run every week for free that cover any and everything you could possibly need to know to play D&D. If you want to help support the server and this channel, you can also check out our Ko-fi page in the description. We'll also be hosting another poll to vote on which class you all would like to see broken down next in the Discord, so head on over there before the poll closes this Sunday. Our last poll determined that the next class breakdown is going to be on the Bard class, so make sure to prepare a jaunty tune and hide your dragons for next week's episode. But that is everything I had. Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate all of you supporting us here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see all of you next time.